Well, I'm not sure how far back we want to go, but I think I would trace it back to the early 90s when I was writing mostly restaurant reviews for the Minneapolis Star Tribune, but also writing occasional ethics columns. And I picked topics in sort of the ethical issues of everyday life that I thought were fascinating, but often found that I got very little response to them. And then I heard about a local theater company, and I'm pretty sure it was Illusion Theater, that did a one-woman show featuring, and I may be wrong about all the details of this, an Australian madam. And I never actually saw the show itself, but I heard that they created these conversations after some of the performances, to which the public was invited to not just attend, but participate in the conversation. And that set me wondering about what could we do to get people to not just read my columns, but to participate in a conversation. And that led to my proposing to my editors at the Star Tribune a project called Minnesota's Talking. And when we launched Minnesota's Talking back in 1992, we ran a full page ad basically in the paper, inviting people to sign up to participate in these neighborhood conversations. And about, it wasn't really about ethical issues so much as public issues, education, healthcare, crime, racism, and the idea, it was modeled a bit after the conversations that the Kettering Foundation supported through something called the National Issues Forum, where you would identify a problem and then identify three possible solutions to the problem, and then invite people to deliberate about the pros and cons and the trade-offs and which of these solutions do we like better and can we find common ground. So we launched this project with a full page ad, and we were not prepared for the response. We had at one point over 1,000 people sign up, and we had over 100 people volunteer to be sort of hosts and moderators of these discussions, and we had a network all over the state actually of people doing these community conversations in their homes, in libraries, in community centers, in churches, and it was a fascinating project. It was one of the most exciting things I'd ever done, and this was in the era before the internet, or before it was really a factor in people's lives. So we had to mail people packets of questionnaires and discussion materials, and then ask them to fax back their responses with what they were saying. And every month I would go and visit a few of these groups and sort of actually get to talk to the readers, the participants. And I thought it was a great project, but it kind of ran its course. After a couple of years, the editors were less interested in it, and it kind of fell by the wayside. But what I remembered from that, and what really sort of made me think over and over after that, was just how eager people were to be heard, to have their, to not just read the paper, but to be able to engage the paper, to participate in a conversation. So I kept sort of mulling that around in the back of my mind, and what would it be like to create a different kind of journalism, a new kind of newspaper. And I sort of pestered all my friends about this and circulated drafts of something that was going to be called Espresso, which would be based on terminals that would be installed in coffee houses around the Twin Cities, and you could go in and print out your own customized newspaper with the pages that you wanted. So if you were a member of the Weimaraner Owners Club and the, I don't know what, Fulton Parents Association, you would get a customized printed out on demand paper that you could create pages for. So that whole idea of wanting to figure out ways of engaging the audience so that they're not just passive participants, and of sort of trying to invent a different kind of journalism just sort of sat in the back of my mind for quite a while. And then sometime in the early aughts, I heard about this amazing experiment in South Korea called Oh My News, where Mr. O had created a newspaper that was a collaborative effort between a team of about 50 professional editors, and I think they eventually had as many as 60,000 citizen journalists all over South Korea writing about everything under the sun. And they used that, I think they had a bit of a print edition, but it was mainly an online newspaper. And I just got very excited about this. And how could you do something like that in the Twin Cities? And so I started cranking out more of those white paper sort of proposals and circulating them. And then eventually, somewhere around 2004, 2005, well, one thing that happened was the FCC came to town holding hearings about media consolidation, and it was clear that there was a lot of discontent with what the mainstream media had to offer, and that people not suddenly, but more and more people had the tools in their own hands to create their own media. And I think maybe the final catalyst for launching the Daily Planet was when I saw a call for applications from a little nonprofit called the Institute for Interactive Journalism, also known as JLab. And they were looking for proposals for projects that would bring new voices to the media. And so I gathered a group of friends in my living room sometime in January, I think it was, of 2005, and we brainstormed how we would create a new nonprofit organization called the Twin Cities Media Alliance, and submit a proposal for one of those grants from JLab. And that's what we did. We had KFAI as our fiscal sponsor, and we submitted a proposal, and out of something like 243 proposals that they received, we were one of 10 that was selected for funding. And so it was a $12,000 grant. We took that money and spent some of it on a website, the original Daily Planet website, and some of it to hire an editor. We had a guy named Craig Cox, who was our first editor of the Daily Planet, and that's how we got our start. Let's see, at that time I was still basically a volunteer. I was the chair of the board of the Twin Cities Media Alliance, and I think we unofficially launched sometime in the fall of 2005, launched the Daily Planet, and then made it official in 2006, which I think is when we also finally got our 501c3 nonprofit status. And we chugged along for a couple of years. This was kind of a sideline while I was working at the Star Tribune, and I made lots of efforts to make sure that all of my bosses, and there were several layers of them at the Star Tribune, knew what I was doing. And at first it wasn't much, but what happened was the Daily Planet started to grow. We started getting more and more readers and more attention, and so I eventually started sending notes to my various bosses, editors, saying, oh, by the way, here's the news on the Daily Planet. We've grown, or we got this recognition or this honor or something, and they would say, that's nice, thanks for keeping me in the loop. And then at some point it got to be so big a project that I thought I better make sure that the executive editor at the time knows about it. So I got my editor to send him a note, and he wrote back and said, thanks for keeping me in the loop, or something like that. And then all of a sudden things turned. All of a sudden, and I'm not exactly sure why, the management of the Star Tribune got very upset about the fact that I was doing this project. And so there was this big legal tussle with management saying that it was violating my terms of employment for me to be doing the Daily Planet, and the union, the guild, saying no, it's within my rights to do this, and back and forth. And then into the midst of all this, in about 2007, the Star Tribune was sold, and there was a clause in the contract that said that if the paper was ever sold, employees would have the right to take a buyout. And so I was just so immersed in what I was doing with the Daily Planet, the Media Alliance, that I requested the buyout and left the Star Tribune, and drove from the Star Tribune offices with a bunch of boxes in the back seat straight to a board meeting of the Media Alliance, where I was offered a paid, very part-time job as the new executive director. And so that's how I got here, and of course that was 7 years ago now, and much has happened since. We've continued to grow tremendously. We've had our editor, Mary Turk, who's been on board almost as long as I have, and we've had several other remarkable staff members over the years. We have a great staff now. But I'm going to stop long enough for you to kick in another question.
Well, the Alliance might be a concept to some people watching and totally opaque to others. Can you describe what it looks like today?
Okay. Well, the Twin Cities Media Alliance, let me just differentiate the terminologies here. The Twin Cities Media Alliance is a 501c3 nonprofit with a mission of improving the quality, accountability, and diversity of local media. And I think that mission statement has been tweaked a little bit over the years. And we do a variety of things, but our biggest single project over the years has been the Twin Cities Daily Planet, which is this local news website. We call it people-powered journalism because a lot of the writing is done by non-professionals, community members, although we do have professional editors, and we try to maintain professional journalistic standards. We have a focus on underreported stories in underserved communities. So that's the Daily Planet. It combines a lot of original reporting by citizen journalists with the best of the neighborhood, community, and ethnic press. I think one of our core missions is to take the best of the community and ethnic and immigrant press and help it reach a larger audience. For most of our existence, that's really been the main thing that we've done, but we've also offered a few classes on the side. Initially they were mostly journalism classes. We had something called, Citizen Journalism Boot Camp. What's happened just in the last year or so is that our classes and training have expanded dramatically. We started an agreement last year with MELSA, the Metro Library Service Agency, to offer media skills classes at branch libraries throughout the metro area. And so just almost overnight, or at least over a year, we went from offering 20, 30 classes a year to offering over 100, most of them through the library system. And then last year, we also built on a relationship that we had with the Bush Foundation to offer media skills training to some 25 community nonprofits. And that has proven to be a very successful thing that we've done, and it's helped us develop relationships with these nonprofits. And then also last year, we started something called the Media Skills Fellowship Program, where we invited people who wouldn't otherwise have access to media skills training, mostly from underserved communities, to go through a 10-week program of media skills training. And they got a small stipend for doing that. And that's all this sort of very rapid growth that we've gone through in the past year. We're now, the Media Alliance is no longer just the Daily Planet with a few classes on the side. The classes and the training are becoming a more and more important part of what we do and who we are. And we've also, but I should add that the Daily Planet has also grown tremendously. Just in the last year, readership grew by over 50%. And so, does that answer the question?
Yeah. So, what are the gross numbers like? What's your readership? What kind of participation do you get in a year in your workshops? That kind of thing.
The gross numbers, it's funny because it's really bounced around a lot. It was on a very steady rise throughout 2013, and then Facebook mysteriously changed its algorithm, and this affected a lot of smaller publications like us, so that a lot of what we posted on Facebook and through our followers and so forth reached fewer people. But I think we are still at somewhere around 150,000 unique visitors a month, and somewhere around 250,000 page views, although at one point in the fall it was closer to 400,000. So those numbers, those are the readership numbers. In terms of classes, we don't really get very complete attendance figures from the libraries. We know how many people registered for our classes, and that ranges wildly. We've had classes at our offices where 2 people have shown up, or 3 people, and classes where we've had over 20 people show up. And in terms of the libraries, we get tremendous feedback. We hear that the librarians are very happy with the classes. We hear that the people who attend them are very happy with them. But how many, and my understanding is that, again, there are classes where we get, the standing room only, or whatever, 15 people in a class, and classes where 2 people show up. And it kind of depends on the library and the weather and everything else.
But in a year, how many classes do you offer?
Last year it was somewhere over 100, just over 100. But that doesn't include a bunch of the other things we do, because we also do what we call newsroom cafes. Our editors just pick a couple of coffee houses every month and show up, and it's sort of an open session for writers who want to come and find out about the Daily Planet, or who want to workshop stories that they're working on. So we do those newsroom cafes, and then we also have once a month what we call a social media clinic, and we do encourage people to register for those, but it's basically a drop-in session where whatever question you have about social media, it's like usually the last Thursday of the month between 4 and 6, you come in and we have somebody on hand who can help you set up that Facebook page or figure out why this or that isn't working. So 100 sort of formal classes, and then a couple of dozen newsroom cafes a year, and a dozen of these social media clinics more or less. Those are the numbers. We did lose a chunk of our funding for 2014, and so we've had to cut back somewhat on, well, at least on the classes that we sponsor ourselves. The one that we offer through the libraries are fully funded, so we're able to do those. And we've had to cut back a bit on our editorial budget. So we still pay writers for many of the stories we publish, but somewhat fewer and somewhat less, at least until some new funding sources come online.
So, what does it take financially to keep this operation afloat?
In dollar figures?
Roughly, I mean, how big a thing is this? You're doing a tremendous amount of work. What's
Well,
it looking like in terms of the need?
We've always operated on a shoestring, and how do you extend that metaphor? The shoestring has gotten a little frayed this year. I think our budget for 2013 was around $330,000, depending on whether you're looking at income or expenses or whatever. This year it's considerably less, or at least we're starting the year with a projected budget that's considerably less, but we're doing a lot of things to try to diversify our revenue streams, to try to generate more income from our readers and the people who take our classes, and from providing some consulting services. So where we'll end up by the end of the year is a little hard to say.
Now, I mean, I know about the Daily Planet because I get it every day in my email inbox. Is that usually the way people encounter the Daily Planet?
I would say, I'm trying to figure out the comparative numbers. No, a lot of people do get our email and get one of our newsletters. We have a bunch of newsletters, by the way. We have one for our arts coverage. We have one for the University District neighborhoods. We have one that's just about education. We have one that's just about food. We just started one that's just for the Central Corridor. And then we have our daily headlines. And, we get, I'm trying to think of what the numbers are. I think it's usually 4,000 to 5,000 visitors a day, and that's a much larger number than the number of people who get our newsletter or who actually open our newsletter. So no, most people get the Daily Planet by coming to the website, www.tcdailyplanet.net. But a lot of people do subscribe to our newsletter, and some people subscribe to the newsletter and then click to see the full stories on the Daily Planet.
It's an incredible operation. You've chosen to diversify so well. It's an amazing thing.
Yes, I mean, I think that's, I would say it's primarily driven by our mission, that we want to, the updated version of our mission statement is that we use the media to create a more just, more inclusive, and more vibrant Twin Cities by ensuring that everybody has access to the media tools and skills they need to participate fully in the life of their community, or our community. And that's the elevator speech, by the way. But to do that, it's not enough to just give people classes and training when they really don't have a platform for using their voice, and it's not enough to provide a media platform when people don't have the skills to use that platform effectively. So we see a real synergy between what we try to do with the Daily Planet, with a community publication, and what we try to do with our classes and training. And there's also an element of sort of business sense to it, that up till now we've been very heavily funded by foundations, and foundations generally don't, it's pretty rare to find foundations that are willing to fund journalism. So often they're more interested in funding training, they're more interested in funding community building, and so being not just a news organization but also a training organizations kind of, I think, helped us to do our work and to survive.
So how much does the training actually end up feeding the news organization?
That's an interesting question. I mean, initially, all of our training was centered on journalism, and so I think there was the expectation that most people who took our training would at least write a few stories in the course of doing the training. But what we found is that there's a much bigger audience for and a much bigger need for example, social media training. One of our most popular classes is called Using Facebook to Promote Your Business or Organization, or how to build a free or low-cost website, or how to be a LinkedIn power user. And those don't really feed the news columns of the Daily Planet. I mean, they very much help us fulfill our mission. They, teaching people how to use Facebook to support their organization or to support their business helps create a more vibrant Twin Cities, but it doesn't feed our journalistic purpose. But then some of our classes do, and a lot of the people who go through our Media Skills Fellowship program wind up creating content for the Daily Planet. I hate that word content, but it really refers to the fact that we're not just talking about reported news stories, we're also talking about photography and video and slideshows and things that go beyond news stories.
Now, when I get what I get in my email box, it divides usually into a couple of 3 big stories, and then references to a bunch of blogs. And there's some other things that happen, but those are what when I notice it as a couple or 3 stories, and then links to blogs that the Daily Planet follows regularly, or sponsors in some ways. And I've been really interested in this relationship between the Daily Planet and established bloggers. Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, we have a variety of relationships with bloggers. We have some people who blog exclusively for us using the Daily Planet as their platform. And then we have other people who have established blogs and come to us and want to be media partners, which means that they give us permission to republish their blogs on our website. And often that helps them reach a much larger audience than they would on their own. It's somebody sees it on the Daily Planet and forwards it, and then it gets picked up somewhere else. And so those are the basic relationships. I mean, we don't, one distinction out that we always try to stress is that, if something is published as a Daily Planet original article, that means it's been edited by our editors, but that's generally not true of blogs. Blogs get, monitored, or we don't allow certain kinds of offensive content, libelous or racist or sexist or obscene, but beyond that we don't make an attempt to edit blogs, and nor do we pay for them. We just provide a platform for people to share their points of view, whereas with reported news stories they go through a very rigorous editing process before we publish them as Daily Planet news stories.
Robin Gillette, Executive Director of the Minnesota Fringe Festival, and just sort of taking an opportunity to sit down and look back at the recently concluded 2013 Fringe. The dust has settled a little bit. We've spent some time looking at numbers and trying to sort out what's what and what happened and why it happened and was it all good. And it's been really fun. I think it was our 20th anniversary festival, and it was great because it was a chance to reflect back on 20 years and to kind of take the opportunity to see where we were 20 years ago and what is the festival that was built by people who are not me, and see what it has become, both in terms of growth in size, but also its growth in the difference it makes in people's lives, the difference in artists' lives and in audiences' lives and in the local ecosystem of Twin Cities theater. So I think for the basic numbers, we had 176 shows this year in 16 venues, nearly 900 performances, and just a hair over 50,000 tickets, which is a pretty extraordinary benchmark. So, and do you have directions you want to go, or?
Well, to my distress, this is your last year as director. And so there's a chance to kind of think back over the time you've watched the Fringe. Some things have changed, I've noticed. I mean, the kitties disappeared this year.
The kitty did disappear.
There was a particular annoying line in the instruction to audiences after the show that finally got deleted this year.
Really? What was
Yes.
that?
It was the business about how we have to clean up, and so please get out of here quickly.
Right.
Which
Was the wrong tone.
wrong tone.
Right,
And
which dawned on
there are
us.
lots of little things. I felt like there were fewer places where there was a show I wanted to see, but I knew if I got over there I'd be stuck forever, unable to get back to anything else. That happened other years. It didn't happen this year.
Cool.
And I don't know, maybe that's just, it seemed a little more centralized.
I
Traffic
think
patterns
our
seemed a
traffic
little better.
patterns were different this year. I think we did a nicer job. Like, the venue lineup changes every year, kind of based on what's available and what's affordable and just the right combination of neighborhoods and venues and theater types. But I think this lineup was notably good in terms of, it was kind of in 4 basic clusters. We had Uptown and Downtown and Loring Park and the West Bank, or by U of M. And each venue had at least 3 within easy walking distance. And I think that makes a huge difference, that you go to a 5:30 show, you come out at 6:30, there's a show in that venue, but there are also 2 more within easy walk that just make it so much simpler to stick around and check something else out.
But the changes, the little changes I noticed that seem to be for the better, open the question about what you take yourself to have learned over the time you were there about how to do a festival like this.
The thing I have learned, and I have gotten a lot better at, both personally and organizationally, is figuring out what's important to everybody and then taking care of that thing. So your curtain speech example is a really good, it's a tiny one, but it's a really good example. It matters a lot to me after the 5:30 show that you get the hell out of the theater, because I have work to do in the theater. That's what matters to me. I need to get you out, I need to get the tickets cleaned up, I need to get the company's set moved off stage, need to get the next company's set moved on stage. Like, I have work to do. But as an audience member, that's not what matters to you. So I need to get what I need done while accomplishing what you need, which is to encourage you to take this opportunity to move out to the lobby, talk to friends, talk to strangers, figure out what you thought of what you just saw, and what's the show you might want to go see next. Whether that's by talking to strangers or looking at the postcard table or pulling out your mobile phone and using the mobile site. So it's a question of trying to look at everybody, whether it's to the artists, the audiences, the volunteers, the press, figuring out what do they need and what's the way to take care of those people and get them what they need. And it's tricky, of course, because what the artist needs doesn't always match what the audience's needs, which doesn't always match what the press needs. So it becomes a balancing act. But I think I've gotten a lot better of articulating that everyone needs to be taken care of with what they need at the level that they're at, and making that happen as much as possible.
Well, the electronic end of the Fringe has always been, the digital end has always been really important, and kind of the thing that makes it exemplary as an event is the possibility of gradually understanding what's going on as the reviews come in and as the preliminary information comes in. Have you seen sort of differences as people have used that? Have things changed in the way audiences relate to the theater, to the pieces? Now that it used to be one might go home and look at this on one's computer. Now one looks at it between shows.
Right.
Has that changed kind of how fast pieces take off?
I think so. I think it makes for a lot more immediacy, because when you go see a show, if you wait until you get in your car and you go home and you get settled and you take off your coat and then go online to write a review, you aren't as jazzed about it or as horrified by it or as moved by it as you would be if you could use Twitter or use Facebook or write the review online 5 minutes after you walk out of the door. And so I think the immediacy of it really does increase people's engagement in the festival in a really cool way.
I mean, my sense, but I haven't compared to other years, was that you sold out more. There were quite a lot of shows that were sold out from the first performance.
That was a first for us this year, that we had shows that sold out their entire run, and that was really exciting. Although it's funny, I just looked at the numbers, and we sold out a few more shows than we sold out last year, but less than 7% of our performances sold out. So it ends up, the sellouts end up getting a lot of buzz, and people talk about them a lot because it's a big deal. But proportionally, we don't sell out the vast majority of our shows. So it's always a balancing act for us to celebrate the ones that sell out, because we're super excited and really happy for them. But we don't want the masses to think, oh, I'm not going to bother coming to Fringe because everything is sold out. It's like, no, I swear to you, there are many tickets available waiting for you at the door.
Yes, like I had one experience, I think, of hitting a sold-out show last year. I had 2 or 3 this year, but that was going constant. So,
right.
It really is true. There's a lot of space there. I've been curious. This may be an embarrassing figure. You might not know it, but I've been curious. I think sometimes about entering a show in the Fringe myself. Every so often, I usually lie down until it goes away, but I have had this thought.
Yes.
And one thing I'm curious about from that standpoint is, I don't want to make money. I don't care if I make money on this thing.
Okay.
I just don't want to lose my shirt. Can you give me any idea how likely I am to lose my shirt?
Oh, for how the dollars work? Sure. Yeah, just in general. So if you applied to the festival, you would spend, depending on how much confidence you had in the audiences you could pull, which relates to how big of a venue you want, you would pay either $350 or $450. So that would be your initial investment. And then it would be totally up to you was it just you, or did you hire a cast of thousands? Did you have fancy custom designed costumes and big fancy props, or was it really just you on a stage telling a story? So the expenses are yours to control. You'd probably spend $100 or $200 on making postcards and promoting that. And the median payout of the checks I wrote this week was about $1,100. And the smallest check was, I think, $200. And the largest check was over $8,000. So the span of money is pretty wide. And there's some people who do this to make money. There are a lot of people who do not do this to make money.
So the person to whom you wrote the $200 check, assuming minimum investment, $350, was out about $150.
More or less, yeah.
And that's pretty much the max you could lose with minimum investment.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Unless you actually slap the audience around.
Right. So it's a pretty low risk thing, and if you think of it as, for some people doing theater is a hobby, for some people it's a career, for some people it's a passion, but as an investment in a thing that brings you some other kind of joy, $150, $200 is not a fortune. It's not a fortune.
And for solo shows especially.
Right.
For things, small venue solo shows, with a little bit of work, you could count on at least breaking even.
You could, oh, very much so. Yeah, and it's kind of fun. One of the things we've gotten a lot better at Fringe, and this kind of goes back to figuring out what people want and then taking care of them, is trying to work with the producers, because we work with a mix of people who do this all the time and do this for a living, and people who have never ever done this before. And trying to help them figure out when we start, so what's the point of this? And that there's no right answer to that question, but answering that question for you makes a difference in your next steps. If your goal is to make a lot of money, then you need to give thought to the material you pick to know that it'll be crowd-pleasing material. You need to give thought to how much money you're spending on a marketing campaign. You need to give thought to how are you going to do put together a press release and contact press to get them to come see your show, because that drives attendance. If what you care about is you have a personal story you need to tell, a personal experience in your life, Fringe is known for having 1 million gay coming out stories. That is a certifiable genre at Fringe. And those stories are told because the person wants to say those words and relate that experience and share that experience, which is not a dollar-related thing necessarily. So for that person, it's figuring out what is the story you want to tell, how much time do you spend writing your script, crafting your script, rehearsing it, bringing in outside observers to be sure that you're conveying that story as best you can, and then figuring out, if the topic is gay coming out, if the topic is women in World War II in the WAC, the Air Corps, if the topic is homeless people, if what you need to do is tell a story, then you need to focus your energy on identifying to whom you want to tell that story and reaching out to them, calling all the homeless shelters in town and offering them information about your show. If your goal is you're new in town and you are an actor or a director or a playwright or a something, and your goal is to be seen and see, then yeah, you do a show and you need to be sure your show is done well, but you need to focus on coming out and being social and introducing yourself to everybody you can think of, and figuring out who are the casting directors and your directors in town, and sending them a letter or an email inviting them to come look at you in the thing that you're doing on this stage. And all of those things are completely viable reasons for doing a show, but you'll be happier with the result if you know what result you were going for and you aimed at that result rather than just doing a Fringe show the textbook way, because there is no really textbook way.
So how much communication do you have with artists to explore this sort of issue?
We do a lot. We do the lottery to select the participants by random lottery in February. And then in February, we start talking to them we ask them questions about what, in very, very broad terms, what is your show? Is it a giant cast, and therefore we need to put you in a big theater? Is it an intimate one-man show, in which case we should put you in a small, intimate space? Are you a dance show, and therefore we need to find a performance space that's got appropriate dance floors and side lighting so we can do a proper job illuminating you? Are you a show that could operate in the round? Or are you a puppet show or a magic show that would be destroyed by having audience behind you? Because there are certainly shows that can't work with audience all around them. And then at the same time, we start talking to them about what is their goal, how do they articulate, what are they trying to accomplish, and then what do they need from us to learn how to accomplish those things. Then we spend the spring doing one-on-one email and phone consultations and also producer workshops to teach them how to write press releases or how to use social media. Social media has been a fantastic boon to performing artists and other people as a very low-cost way to promote a thing. But there are good ways to use social media and terrible ways to use social media. And so we try to offer training in that. And on top of that, if you're marketing a show in November, yeah, there are other people in town who are doing a show in November, and you'll be competing with those people. During Fringe, there are 175 other people who are all marketing exactly directly on top of you, and the din is astonishing. And so it's even if you're great at Twitter and Facebook, figuring out how to make your show stand out amidst 170 other shows that are also yelling without being irritating and drowning the system in, hey, remember me, I'm doing a show. Hey, remember me, I'm doing a show. So we do a lot of training like that. We talk to a lot of the producers have never worked because it's their first time producing a show. They're not used to working in professional theaters with professional lighting designers. They're not accustomed to that world. And so we spend a lot of time teaching them how would you talk to a lighting designer to convey the mood, the essence, the thing you're trying to put on stage. Because if you've done this hypothetical show that you'll do next year, no one expects you to come into the theater and say, okay, well, what I need a blue wash, and it needs to be this gel color with this kind of instrument at this kind of an angle. No one wants that from you, and you don't know those words. But what you know is that you're telling a story, and it happens very late at night in a very spooky forest. And that's all you need to know, and that's all you need to say. And then it's the job of our folks to say, aha, spooky forest late at night, check. That's going to look like this and this and this and this, and then they do some magic and they create that lighting look for you on stage.
Magic, I resonate with. The lighting for the zebra shirt of Lonely Children was, I couldn't believe it.
Oh, good.
I mean, and other lighting was fine, but that one had some interesting demands. Well, I've been thinking about the various good things the Fringe does. You just make a list and it doesn't stop, from economic development to making people aware of venues and the nuts and bolts of where you park and how you get to a venue and all that sort of stuff that will make it possible for them to come back, to the sort of community building stuff and the honing of critical skills, which is also pretty big. I mean, you look at somebody else's review and realize they did it better. That's a terrific learning process, but then I sort of miss the dimension of all of the educating of actors, producers, everybody that goes on.
And we're super proud of that, because we figure it's an opportunity to teach skills. Like, our deal has never been to make people better actors, better singers, better dancers. That's not our goal. But what we can do is train people to be better producers. And that will be useful either if they come back and produce again at the Fringe. That's useful skills. If they go on and do independent shows at the Theater Garage or Bryant Lake Bowl or Nimbus Theater, those are useful skills. Or even if you never produce a show again, but have learned something about communicating on social media, or have learned how to write a press release that is competent and clear and efficient, that's transferable. If you've learned how to sit down with a project and make a timeline for, this is when my script needs to be done, this is when my props need to be done, this is how many dollars I have, this is how it's going to work. Budgeting and scheduling is something that you have to learn at Fringe, but you can take that skill absolutely anywhere. So as an educational tool, it's useful both within theater and dance, but also outside of theater and dance.
We've talked over the years about trends. I mean, there have been the funny ones, like the year that erotic involvement with furniture was big.
That was mystifying.
Any you've seen recently you'd like to mention?
I think. It's funny, this year we had less Shakespeare than usual. I think we had less pop culture mashups than usual. We had a lot of women's shows this year, like looking back at historical women, whether that's historical funny women like Irma Bombeck, or the one I mentioned, we had a woman who told her own mother's story of having been in the war in World War II. And it was a true woman's story, but it was neat to see the actual daughter telling her mom's story. That was a super cool thing. We had there was a story of Martin Luther's widow, which is certainly not a period of history that I know at all, but there's a woman who told her story of having been married. She was in her late 80s, having been married to a man who was in the Hitler Youth as a child, and kind of how that shaped who he became, and shaped their marriage, and shaped her world as an after effect of the Hitler Youth program. So that was definitely a really interesting and cool trend this year. But yeah, it is just all over the map, and it's just fun to see the real spectrum of there is dance, and there is comedy, and there is improv, and there's kid stuff, and there's very much not kid stuff, and it's everywhere, and all the things.
Now, this is a non-juried
Yes.
festival. Has your faith in that ever wavered?
You know, for tiny fractional moments, when I come out of a show and it was not very good, because that happens, but I come out of the show and I saw a thing that I wanted to see, and I saw a thing that person wanted to do, and there's merit in that, and that person did the thing they wanted to do, and the unjuried nature of the festival means that people who wouldn't otherwise get a chance to try a thing. They learn something, I'm exposed to a thing that I haven't seen before, and that's always good. I might not have enjoyed it or thought it was the best it could have been, but I've seen something that was new to me, and that is a growing experience for me and everyone else in the audience. And I think the world is full of places that jury, and that's great, and I think that's how the world probably should be and needs to be. But I love that the Fringe provides an opportunity for absolutely anybody to do absolutely anything.
I was worried about that the first couple of years, and I saw the dogs, the obvious dogs.
Yep.
But what I've been surprised by is how just the requirement of actually producing something tends to establish an informal standard. Not every idea that somebody can have
Correct.
can be brought to the stage.
Right. It's a fair amount of work to get yourself from having been drawn in the lottery to do all the forms and do all the meetings and pay attention and hit all the marks. Yeah, there's a certain threshold that does screen out the folks who just aren't serious.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you, and I don't know that I would have when I started going to the Fringe.
And it's tricky. It is a battle that we fight, honestly, with attracting new audiences. The world wants to be told what's good, because it's easy. It's easier to have someone tell you what's good. And that's harder at the Fringe. You have to work harder because it's there. You can go to our website and you can read audience reviews. You can read 4,000 reviews of shows by people just like you. You can go to the Star Tribune and the Pioneer Press and the City Pages and read professional press reviews to help you figure out what's good. But there's not an overarching artistic vision or theme or theory to the festival in a way that there is with other things. And I think people do worry that they're going to come and they're going to spend their $12 and they're going to see something that's not good. And we try to say, that doesn't happen very often. The odds of your seeing something good are better than your odds of seeing something not good. And Fringe, it's an experience. It's coming to Fringe. It's being part of the creation of something new. And that has intrinsic value. And being able to offer feedback after you're done has intrinsic value. And being part of a community where there's a comfort level where someone can bring new work to the stage, or a new performer can take the stage for the very first time. And the role of the audience in enabling that to happen is so huge. And I think that's a huge part of what makes Fringe amazing.
Struck over the years by the kind of fund of goodwill that you personally have built. I think I was struck last year that somebody named a drink after you, and I believe that's typical. That's
it
what
happens.
I hear. In that spirit, the spirit that you got friends out there, what's next for you?
Man, I do not know. I am taking a leap into the abyss here. I love this job very, very much. I love Fringe very, very much. And it is an exhausting job and an all-consuming, life-absorbing job. And I can see burnout on the horizon. And out of respect and concern for myself and for the festival, I want to leave at the right time rather than waiting too long. So I wanted to leave when the festival was good, when I was good and still loved it, and there was a good time to engineer a proper search process and a proper transfer. So I can walk away loving it, and the board can be happy with the work that I've done and be happy with a selection for someone to take it to the next level. So all of that meant that I made my move before I had my next move ready. So I will take some time, and I figure I am good enough at enough things that I'll figure something out, and we'll just see what that looks like.
I was struck by the transition. It just seems very rare that the next director's in place when the last director leaves. There's an overlap.
It's so lucky. It is great. Jeff Larson, who's taking over for me, has been with the festival in various capacities since 1999. So he knows it inside and out, but he's one of those rare people. There's usually a fear that once someone has been with an organization for forever, they become really set in their ways. And Jeff has this constant spirit of inquiry and challenge. So even though he's been with it for a long time, he has a real hunger to always examine the choices that are being made and be sure that they are being made for the right reason, and that next year that it's still the right reason. So I think that he brings a lot of knowledge, but won't get stuck in a rut, but has new ideas and wants to do some new things. So yeah, and it's nice. It's nice to have a transition that is on purpose. It seems like so often in the nonprofit world, transitions come because there's a disagreement at the board level, and so it's forced from above. Or there's problems at the staff level, so it's forced from below. Or there's a deficit, or there's missing money, or there's a scandal, or there's a funding cut, or there's a problem, a capital P problem. And it has been really fun to feel like we're engineering a transition because it's the right thing to do. And everyone is in agreement that it's the right thing to do, and that has been a delight.
So, in some ways, it's good you described yourself as a person who's easily bored. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be hard to find a next job
Amen.
that's that good.
Yeah.
I know you don't know what you're going to do next, but in the last minute we have, mm-hmm. Could you just say what your standards might be for? What do you having the Fringe experience behind you, and knowing what you know about yourself mm-hmm. now? What do you need in your next job to be happy?
It has to be multifaceted. It is challenging, but ultimately very satisfying to be serving artists and audiences, which is, I really do feel like I'm split between those two worlds. And it's audiences that want to be served and artists that want to be served. So everyone at Fringe comes to the table eager to engage, eager to help, and articulate about their needs. And I think that sense of engagement, whatever I do, will have to be there. So constant change and fluctuation and excitement.